Sylvie Scowcroft. How are ya?
Hi, Jennifer Apple. I'm doing pretty well.
I love when people throw the last name back at me too. I just think it's a cute little moment. For anybody who does not know you, who are you today?
So today I am showing up in this space as a financial planner, though also show up in other spaces as a dancer and a producer and a mother and an arts enthusiast in general.
I love it. I am super grateful to have you in this space to probably have what feels like harder conversations than most of us enjoy having. But again, why I believe that this podcast is important is to dispel, empower, and demystify a lot of the things that perhaps we weren't talked about. And finances and certainly the financial planning of the things, I can speak on behalf of myself, was not something I was ever taught, especially when I was younger, and has certainly been something that I continue to learn and try to explore to empower myself as a grown-ass adult. So I'm curious how you became one. Like, what drove you to
Yeah.
that as a path?
So first I will say that you are definitely not alone.
Yeah.
Basically everyone that I talk to also gets no formal education, doesn't know where to start, also just feels bad about it.
Yeah.
Um, so I have kind of straddled the worlds of art and money for my whole life. I still went to school for economics and dance. And then afterwards I got a job at Bank of America, but not as a financial planner, just as a on their risk team.
Mm,
And while I was there, I had a lot of friends asking me like, "Oh, what do I do with my 401k and all this stuff?" because they assumed, "Oh, you work at a bank, you should know this stuff." But like
right.
I didn't know any more than they did because that's apparently not a prerequisite for working in finance. So that is so everyone just wanted to let you know that personal finance is very different from like other
Yeah.
basically every industry. And you are definitely not alone when you struggle with these things. And so basically at that point I started to as field all these questions for my more artistic friends, and I didn't last very long at Bank of America, and then I meandered my way through a couple of other jobs trying to figure out what it was I could do that would be helpful to the artistic community while still like give myself freedom and flexibility to like produce shows and
Mm,
dance and work on my creative pursuits. And a few years ago I like landed on financial planning because I saw such a direct need for that.
mhm.
Um, and so I got my certification, which was a bunch of classes and like a very long, full day long exam and 2 years of experience. And so I am now a fully certified financial planner. And my passion is really like both demystifying the jargon that has been constructed so that we will not understand it.
Mhm.
Um, and also just bringing confidence and empowerment to those that I know.
Yeah.
And especially artists because I have been in the arts in some capacity for most of my career.
Yeah. What have you found to be some of the things that you try to demystify?
I mean the main thing that I can do is people will show me their numbers and I can just be like, "You are fine. Like you are doing great."
Yeah.
And that's like,
Yeah.
like you are going to be able to survive. And that's kind of one of those things with financial planning is there is no right and wrong. It is very much like what tools and practices do I need to use to be able to use my tools and resources to create the life that I want? And
Yeah.
so what's right for you, it might be wrong for someone else. And when you're looking at someone else, that might actually not be right for what you need.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what it is then that you do. I feel like there's kind of an idea that people have of like, oh, I need to get a financial planner and this will happen. Or, when do I get a financial planner if I'm at this part of my life? Or, oh, I don't make
Yep.
enough money. Do I even need to? Let's talk about like what it is and why.
Sure. Yeah. So financial planning is essentially the alignment of what's important to you with like what capital that you have to use.
What do you mean by
So
capital? Like how much
like
money you
time,
make?
time, money, and also energy.
Right.
So those things all kind of have to mix together. And while we focus more on the finances, there also is definitely a part of like energy and attention and time that factors in to what you're willing to spend your money on.
Mhm.
So that is really like true financial planning answers that question and tries to like merge the circles together so that what you're using your time and money and energy on is also what you value.
If I were to do one of those Venn diagrams, like we're trying to
Exactly.
do one
Yeah.
of those, so you have your time on one side, your energy on the above, and the
And
money
the
on the other
slowly, yeah.
come together. Got it.
Exactly.
So, if I am at do I reach out to a financial planner when I'm at a certain point in my career, or is it like
Yeah.
you wanna start as soon as you can to organize so that you can reach certain goals? Like, what is that?
So I would say historically, financial advising has been known to just be like you have X number of invested assets that that person can manage. That's when you reach them. There's definitely like the tide is shifting. I will say there's a whole lot of financial planners that I know, both young people and women and people who are not have not normally been represented in that space, who are
Mhm,
now coming to the space with ideas of like, no, we can help all people.
mhm,
Um, there's a whole lot of courses that are available, or there's like all sorts of uh, variety of financial planning, like levels. For example, I offer both like a one-time two meeting engagement
mhm,
where you kind of just like get all your boxes checked and know exactly what. So we cover like both your budgeting and cash flow and also your financial goals and then what income you expect to have or how to manage your income if you have any. We do a little bit of tax planning. We also do I don't really like to say retirement planning because a lot of people I know don't view retirement the same way.
mhm,
So it's really just like what kind of financial freedom do you want to build into your plan? And then we also talk about insurance and estate planning and if you need a will and all sorts of things. So basically, everything that touches your finances, we will cover in those two meetings.
mhm.
Um, and hoping that I'll just like be able to send you on your way and you'll just feel have more peace of mind about it.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, there are people who do, I find with artists especially, there are so many who make no money for so long. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I'm doing fine now. And I have no idea how to
Mm,
handle that.
mhm.
And so there is that other level of the spectrum with like you have assets and you have um, money to invest. And I can also help you with that if you want. I can show you how to do it yourself, or I can actually manage your assets for you.
Got it.
Um, so that is the spectrum.
I have so many questions in so many different directions, and so my brain is kind of atrophying a little bit around what I feel the direction that will serve us will be, so I might just bounce us around a little bit because I want
That
to
sounds great.
maximize our
Yeah.
time. So let's say I do decide to work with you,
Hmm.
on the former. Let's say it's not like I hit
Yep.
it big and now all of a sudden I have money.
Yeah.
Let's say it's me as a human being right now with where I sit and all of my time, energy, money
Hmm.
pools. I come to you and what are we doing? I guess like let's can you walk us through an example of like you and me working together and maybe on a bird's eye view of like how we start to look at these things that perhaps
Sure.
folks who are listening could start to do on their own?
Yeah. So I mean, the first thing that I need is I just need to see all of your numbers,
And is
and
this
that's
outlined in like a spreadsheet? Is this like here are my receipts in a little folder that I'm just dumping on your desk? Like what am I
I
doing?
yeah. I will send you a form to fill out essentially, and you put in like these are my accounts, these are their balances, this is my income. And I think this is something that turns a lot of people off because they
Mhm.
don't sometimes have the chance or they don't really know those things
Or want to look because I think
or
it can be
want to look.
really
Yeah,
scary. Mhm.
it can be. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be very helpful unless I know exactly like where you're coming from.
Mhm.
Um, so you will tell me all of that, and I'll be able to look at it as from like just a bird's eye holistic view and be able to point through like these are the things that she's doing well, and these are the things that she's probably we need to discuss. Um, that are maybe questions. And I always ask like, what are your goals? Like 3 to 5 goals, both short term and long term. What do you want for your financial life? And then I've never actually had anyone come to me like with like I want a comprehensive financial plan. It's more like there's these two things that I've been wondering
Mhm.
like pretty persistently for a long time. And so I also always want to know like what those are as well.
Okay,
So we, like,
so
make
if
sure that we
I'm
address those.
but, like, goals can be many things, right? Like, I can be like, I
Sure.
want to be, I don't want to be stressing about my finances. I imagine that could be a
Yeah,
goal. Or
for
somebody,
sure.
I want to be making, multi six-figured whatever income over the
Yeah,
course of this year, right? I imagine there's, like, the emotional and the
for
literal.
sure. And there's also, like, some people put in, like, "I wanna have 2 kids," which is, like, partly a lifestyle choice, but partly that affects your finances. So there's
Mhm.
all sorts of it definitely runs the gamut.
Okay.
Um
And so when you look at my numbers in my, checking my savings, how things are
Mhm,
coming in, I imagine, my income versus my deductions versus, if I'm actually in the red or in the green, all of those things, and you
mhm,
start to see my patterns, right?
mhm.
Are
Yep.
you then saying, okay, why are you doing what you're doing? Is it more, hey, I see this is what you're doing. This needs to shift. What is the protocol around once you actually see the numbers in front of you?
Definitely the first step is being like, "This is what I see. Is this what your lived experience is?"
Mhm.
And some people will be like, "That no, I forgot something," or "That doesn't quite reflect it." Or they'll be like, "Yes, really? Is that really? Like, I didn't
Mhm.
know that." And then I don't really have to say anything else because they'll
Mhm.
be like, "Oh, I think I need to make X changes," and
Okay.
then I can figure out what steps we can take to get from A to B.
Okay. So if I'm being brave enough to look at my stuff on my own and I'm
Mhm.
looking at my numbers, and recognizing that that's really hard to do, especially if
Oh,
this
for
is the
sure.
first
Yeah.
time one is doing that for oneself, what am I looking for if I don't have you?
So the most valuable thing that you can know about yourself, especially as a creative person with a non-steady traditional income,
Mhm.
that you can know like what how much you need to live for a month.
Mhm.
Like what are your total expenses for 1 month, 6 months, a year? Um, and having that number in the back of your head can be like so powerful. It can help you, like, know how much cash you need to have on hand. It can help you, like, going into a job, you can, like, have the power to be like, "Oh, this job will support me for 3 months." And that gives you so much clarity to know, like, "Can I relax? Do I have to work every shift that I can at whatever job?" It gives you a lot of, like, mental peace.
Mhm.
I will also say that, like, it is definitely not uncommon for you not to have a budget and not to know your numbers. I have like lots of friends and know lots of work with lots of people who are like, I just kind of feel it out. I don't go
Mhm.
into debt. I know how much I have. I'm aware of it. Like, do I really need to track this?
Mhm.
Um, and to that I say like, if you are fine and if you are like fully satisfied where you are, then like maybe not. Some people are just doing okay, but I will say like if money is something that you want to feel like you have control of, um, and if you want to more actively work towards financial goals, then yes, you need to know where your money is going.
Yeah. I would also say to, quote unquote, plan for um, things that are unexpected, like a
Oh, for
pandemic
sure.
or a
Yeah.
strike. It's like if we're
Mhm.
banking on living paycheck to paycheck or knowing, okay, this is all I need, then perhaps there is um, a little bit less of a cushion, perhaps
Mhm.
moving forward if things were to go awry in some way. I guess I'd love to touch on that too, then, about like some of the pitfalls that might come up when one is aware of how one is looking at one's numbers.
So I think the two common pitfalls that we see are like you either overspend or you oversave.
Okay.
And I think ideally we live like somewhere in the middle of those two things.
Mhm.
So on the overspending side, it is kind of like, well, I have this money, I'm going to spend it now. And there is some of that comes from like a deeper fear of like, oh, I want to buy the things that I need right now because I don't know when I'm going to have the opportunity to buy those things
Mhm.
again. Um, and it also like feels good. Like when you don't feel about your money, sometimes money feels it like just like feels good to spend it and take care of yourself and buy things
Mhm.
that you need. So there's lots of like s- um like they're not like I guess positive reasons why someone would overspend. And I will
Mhm.
definitely say that same way for oversaving. For those of us who have, like, lived in a world where, like, with this scarcity mindset that so
Yeah.
many of us have, the idea of like, I need to save as much as I can and hoard away as much as I can,
Mhm.
and so that I will be safe, like, if anything happens.
Yeah.
But with those blinders on as well, you are losing sight of the bigger picture. And you're also
Which is
like,
what?
which is like, ideally, we will all be able to do the jobs that we love and create a healthy like life with room to do the things that we love, with room to make the money that we need to do and to
Mhm.
spend and to just use money as a tool. I also believe that money like should kind of be in flow.
Mhm.
I think that there is some amount of saving and investing that we need to do for our future, but the hoarding mindset just kind of puts us in a stuck place.
Yeah. How so?
I believe that the more you're able to like use your money as a tool, and just there is some amount of trust that you need to have that like as I go out into the world and continue working, money will continue to come to me.
Yeah, very much.
And but when you're stuck and hoarding it all, it is hard to trust that.
Mhm.
And it can just like negatively affect decisions going
Yeah.
forward.
Well, I think that's part of it too. It's like, as we're having this conversation, I imagine there are many folks who are listening who are just like, oh gosh, my relationship with money, or I don't even want to hear about the word money, or I don't want to talk, the word
Yeah.
finances in and of itself, like going to really ruin my day, and just like we are as humans, we're really set up, frankly,
Mhm.
to feel bad about money generally. We do live in a capitalistic society, whether we like it or not. That's how it's
Yep.
structured, and so we've grown up in a system that is reflective of what it means to have class and what it means
Mhm.
to have more or less. And certainly if we're dialing it even more tightly into an artist sector, we have been taught about a scarcity mindset the entire time, that there's not enough to go around, that you better hold on really tightly or it's not going to happen for you. And,
Mhm.
that somebody else's success is not your success, like all the things that are very antithetical to, frankly, what my value system is.
Yeah.
And so to live in a world that is telling you something counter to perhaps what you actually feel about your own self and your self-worth, we're not empowering ourselves to feel good about money. We're just not.
Yeah.
And so I guess before we even continue diving deeper, like do you have any tools that you recommend to people that you're working with who feel that way, even just talking about money? Because perhaps we're even just jumping the gun here of being like, let's just talk about, like, if I'm giving you a budget, but it's like,
Oh,
what if I
yeah,
can't even
for
talk
sure.
to you about, I don't even
Yep.
want to look, like, how do I begin to feel better about even simply talking about it?
So I'm going to take kind of this in two parts, and I'm going to step back one more, like, and just acknowledge what you said, and acknowledge that there have been a lot of studies that have shown that scarcity on your brain like mimics a trauma response.
Oh yeah.
So not like you don't have to experience like one physical, like a specific trauma. Like if you have been living in scarcity, your brain could like this leads to like reduced cognitive capacity and like reduced ability to make important big decisions.
Mhm.
So then you're stuck in this place, like in scarcity, you have to make a lot of big decisions, but you also are in a mental place that is like not conducive to that.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just wanted to state that that is a real thing and that it is the problem is not you. The
Yeah.
problem is the environment and the mindset and that we have been that has been learned.
Yeah. How do you
Um,
combat that? I mean, like,
yeah,
you're living in it, it's a very
yeah.
real thing.
Oh, for sure. And I will take it a step further and say that community, like having a community of like-minded people that you can talk about this with is can be a huge balm for this mindset. I like so many people I know also experience and feel the same shame around money. And some ways that I've seen that you can like learn to make the money conversations more comfortable are, I would say, first of all, you can just find like if you find one person,
Mhm.
there can be your money buddy. Like find one person who is feeling the same way but wants to get better about money, and then set up money dates with them. That
Okay.
could mean taking the time to talk about money or just like going to a cafe together and like that's where you look at your budget. It's just like
Mhm.
with like together with that person who is working to make the same progress that you are.
Mhm.
I also think that there are some conversation starters that we can use to just like ask your friends and family um, that don't feel that like triggering.
Okay.
So that could be like, what is your earliest memory of money?
Mm,
Like, what did your parents teach you about money?
mhm.
Um, One thing that I love that isn't as much of a social thing, but I did this myself and it ended up being really enlightening, is if you take the time to write a letter to money. So just get out a piece of paper and a pen, so write "Dear Money," and then write all of your feelings down on a piece of paper. And
Yeah.
it's, like, so freeing to be like, "Wow,
Yeah, I would have a
I
lot
felt
to
all of
say.
that."
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would really have a lot to express in that in that letter.
Yeah.
What did you do with it? Did you burn it? Or you
I did not.
framed
I
it?
kept mine because I didn't frame it, but I know exactly where it is just because I do this work for a living, and I thought
Mhm.
it would be helpful to be able to come back to it, but if you wanna burn it, if that feels good to you, then go for it.
Yeah, like, have a little ceremony around that. I think there
For
is
sure.
something to be said about, so much of all of it does live in our brains, and it
Mhm.
also lives probably in our bodies and perhaps
Yeah.
also lives in our hearts and spirits depending on where you're at in the journey, and so to be able to
Mhm.
move through it, to be able to, like, maybe see some sort of shift or change or growth with it, yeah, you have to get it out. I know how many times,
Yeah.
it's, I go on, like, a loop about something, and it's like, "Okay, well, just maybe if you just journaled about this for 4 seconds and you just got all of the things out, you wouldn't be thinking about it in the same exact way because it's right in front of you, and to see it visually is very different."
Yeah.
So I love the idea of a money buddy. I think that's great. I love the idea of a little letter to money, dear money. Is there anything else emotionally that you have found, that people are able to use or go to that allow them to begin to really step into feeling more empowered individually for themselves?
I think starting is the hardest,
100%.
and once you take the baby steps you need to even, like, look at your bank account and assess how you're doing, then that itself is empowering.
Mhm.
And so in order to, like, get yourself in the framework where you're even ready to do that, I there are a couple things I recommend. Marking it down on a calendar, just being like, "This hour is gonna be my money hour,"
Mhm.
and showing up, wearing something comfortable, making yourself some tea, lighting your favorite candle, eating something that you like, doing all these things to make it, like, something that you look forward to
Mm.
in a
Mhm.
way. Um, and then also once you're there, make sure that you're, like, physically comfortable. Like, what can you do to make yourself more comfortable? Make sure you have water nearby. Really set yourself up well.
Mhm.
And, there are also, like, a variety of somatic practices that are useful. I My favorite one, we can do this right now if you want. I It's called orienting. I got this from Nika Kanjani, but I think it is probably more widely done.
Mhm.
Um, but I'll do it if you can see if
Yeah.
you're watching the video and
There
if
you go.
Jennifer,
Go
if
to
you wanna
YouTube.
join
I
me.
will join you 100%.
But so take this so look pick a shoulder and, like, look over your shoulder, and then just slowly, like, scan the space around you.
Mm.
So notice what you see, what colors there are, what objects are around you, what kind of light is coming in. Every time I do this, I, like, notice something else,
Mhm.
even though I'm at my desk, which I sit at, like, almost every day. And then just keep going until you've completed the circle. And made sure and this I do this every time that I feel my nervous system kicking off a little, because it really helps me to know, like, I am in a safe space,
Mhm.
there is nothing scary behind me,
Mhm.
I am present with myself,
Mhm.
I can, like, ground myself enough in this physical space to be able to do the work at hand.
I love it. I mean, again, these small little we know all of them. Like, we know
Oh,
we've
for sure. Yeah.
but just to be reminded, okay, like, this is part of the practice of even bringing myself to something hard, I think is a
Mhm.
really helpful reminder. So, yes to that. I love that a lot.
And then I think the most important thing once you're in that space
Mhm.
is learning how to approach those numbers without judgment.
'Kay. Tell me more.
So you are looking at your numbers, the first thing to be like, "Oh, I can't believe I spent that much on X thing," or "I can't believe that I I don't know, I didn't know this beforehand. And so instead, I want you to bring like a no judgment, but just awareness framework to the practice.
Mhm.
So instead of saying, I can't believe I did that, just say, oh, look, isn't that interesting?
Mm.
Like, oh, I spent a lot of money on this last month. Like, isn't that interesting? And
Mhm.
then just move on to the next thing
Mhm.
because you're just gaining data points.
Yeah. We had an episode with, Che Marita in episode 8 of season 1. It's like one of our first episodes ever, and it's all about budgeting as a value statement. And she talks all about this too, about, if you think about numbers, which are facts, certainly depending on who you ask, but according to me, it's numbers don't lie, which is, I think, why they're both scary and also really important to focus on. And when you look at it, you get to really see reflected back at you where you are placing your values, like where you're placing, as you were talking about, your time,
Mhm.
your energy, certainly your money. And by being more aware of where those choices are, it actually gives you an opportunity to then self-reflect and be like, cool, that's interesting.
Mhm.
How does that feel?
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool. If I choose to not spend, $200 on coffee out, and I know now that I really do want that coffee and it makes me really happy, what if I make it at home and as a reward on a really hard day or after a really terrible audition, that becomes a treat that I then get to give to myself. And it simultaneously, I am rewarding myself for something hard with something that I love. I am saving some money, and I'm not completely eliminating this thing that I love so much from my life by putting it into my life in a different kind of way by making it at home more often. I'm not a coffee drinker, so this is perhaps a terrible example, but I think in my brain that's kind of how it operates.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing that you can learn about is, like, for example, if I really like cooking, but have found that my eating out budget is like very high,
Mhm.
I can question that and like maybe it's not just because I'm lazy, maybe it's because all of that time eating out was spent with friends and
Mhm.
community is something that I really value. And so how do I honor that value of community while maybe spending less?
Yeah.
So instead of like there are all these like different things you can learn about yourself in order to be able to align
Yeah.
like where your money's going with what you need
Yeah,
to
I
feel
love
good.
that. And then you have a conversation with your friends, which is like, "Hey, I wanna continue spending time with you. What if we start doing potlucks or movie nights at each other's homes, and now we're
Right.
actually not spending the money out, we're going to each other's spaces, and we're still having the quality time that we have and not compromising on that, but at least saving in the money pocket of the Venn diagram."
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I love that.
And it shouldn't feel like I don't really ever want budgeting to be like a restrictive practice.
Mhm.
For me, it's been like very liberating to be like, oh, I have X amount to spend every month on groceries. That means I can spend freely up until that limit. You know, it is like so
Yeah.
nice to know instead of every time I go to the grocery store being like, oh, I need to spend as little as possible.
Yeah. When you're working with your people, are
Mhm.
you giving them different categories to look at their money in? So are you giving them buckets of like very large umbrella of like life, career, you know, happiness? Or are you looking at it more like, you know, groceries, health insurance, food going out, entertainment? Like, what are you doing with that?
So I start with some more like I would say traditional specific buckets, but I find that it is like a very personal practice.
Okay.
And so I kind of let clients choose the categories that most resonate with them.
What are some that tend to be common, or at least you would recommend as like a starter kit before people start to get customed?
So I think the primary thing to be able to differentiate between is your fixed expenses and your like flexible expenses. So like you pay the same amount for rent every month.
Mhm.
Like you pay the same amount for insurance every month. You pay the same amount for X every month. And so those things you can't change. So it's really helpful to know like this is the amount of money that's definitely going out the door unless I make
Mhm.
some crazy big change. Like right
Mhm.
now in this system that I live, this is that. And then on the flexible side, you can be like, on average, I spend X amount eating out. On average, I spend X amount on traveling, on X amount. And those things you have a little bit more control over.
Mhm.
So I think it's more over, and I would even go a step further. I kind of think it is in like three larger buckets.
'Kay.
One is fixed, one is flexible, and those are both on a monthly basis. And the other one are these like non monthly buckets. So, like, I don't spend money on travel every month, but I do
Yeah.
spend money on travel every year.
Mhm.
And then I have some, like, random subscriptions that hit annually,
Mhm.
but not monthly. And so there's those things that you kind of have to account for
Yeah.
as well.
Are you looking at if this was the first time again I was, like, looking at my
Mhm,
finances in a more specific way, am I looking at, say, the prior tax year, for example,
mhm.
looking at January through December to see all of these buckets over the course of a year? Am I looking at it starting from where I'm at now to see how this current year is going? Like, what would you recommend?
I would say that's also a personal preference. Like,
Okay.
it takes a lot of time and, like, mental energy to go through an entire year of
Yeah.
expenses. If you could do it, like, more power to you, and that will be, like, incredible amounts of data that you can use. So, like,
Yeah.
that is, I think, the ideal situation. But if that really overwhelms you, just start now. Like,
Okay.
put systems in place to now. I used to just like an Excel spreadsheet for a long time and literally like do categories that was like, this is the thing, I guess this is the date, and then this is the amount.
Okay.
And like that's all I did for at least like a year or two.
You're saying like a date and amount, like I went to this, Thai restaurant and this is how much I spent at the Thai restaurant. That's what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I mean, and there are lots of softwares that most of them you need to pay for, but there are like so many options right now of tools
Mhm.
that will do this for you. Um, and it does take like I would say the barrier of finding a system that works for you and starting the system is truly a pain.
Yeah.
Um, But once you have it set up, it doesn't take that long to maintain over time.
So because I feel the pain of picking that system and that
Mhm.
therefore I'm in stuck and paralysis, what do I do?
So I would say either just go the free way and use an Excel sheet and, like, I didn't
Mhm.
do this it's not like every time I spent money, I would check in and be like I
Mhm.
either did it on a weekly basis or a monthly basis and then
Mhm.
went back I blocked out time and then went back and just, like, wrote down all the things,
Mhm.
which is the more manual way to do it. Um, or I, right now, really like Monarch money, so you have if you have the ability to I think it's, like, $8 a month or something, so
Mhm.
if you want to pay for a system.
Yeah, I mean, I wish there were, and maybe there is, like, I wish there were something that I could literally drop my statement from my credit card statement in, like, my PDF of it that has all of my numbers into a thing. They somehow scan it and then put it into a system for me. Does this exist?
So that's what these softwares do, but then you have to go in and categorize. There's some like because they'll only get the one line off your credit card statement, and
Right.
sometimes it does not like alert the computer exactly what
It is.
category that should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is always some amount of upfront like teaching the system what category this thing
Mhm.
should be.
Yeah, especially if
Um,
sometimes the, like, back-end credit card system is, like, referred to as something totally separate than your
yep.
actual, again, Thai food.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I were to spend, say, $8 for 1 month just to see where my expenses are, and I were to do this,
Basically all of these places do give you a free month or two.
then great. So we love that.
So
So this
yeah,
Monarch
always a free
Money
trial. Yep.
situation.
Copilot is another
Mhm.
one that people really love.
Okay. And so if I were to do that and I were to get a free month just to see where my numbers are,
Mhm,
from that, I then notice my patterns. I give
mhm,
myself grace and say, that's very interesting. And I see the different categories that the things are falling into, from the fixed, from the flexible, and perhaps from the random once a year that may have fallen out on this 1 month that I'm checking. When I
right.
see all these numbers in front of me, now what?
So now you can look at the income that you have coming in and
Mhm.
say, "Does this match? Like, am I spending less than I'm making?
Mhm.
Or does it feel tight?" And this is also taking into account, like, taxes. Um, so spending plus taxes, is that equate or anything that I'm, like, potentially putting away into a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA, does all of this account for equal or less than what I am making? The next step is then to be able, like, to figure out what you have to do about it. So, like, if you're overspending, is there a way to increase your income?
Mhm.
If there's not a way to increase your income, how do you decrease your spending?
Okay. And how do you suggest?
I think that is where like, knowing what your goals and budget and values or your goals and values are really comes in handy.
Mhm.
Because you can go through there and be like, "I need to cut X amount of money, like, where am I spending that doesn't feel aligned with what I actually want to be spending on?"
Yeah. I love that as the barometer
Yeah.
being my alignment rather than frivolity or thinking about your money as something that just you need to cut it because you're doing too much of it. You know, I really do think that there's something about recognizing that money being a tool, we then have a choice of how we're using this tool. And if it's a
Yep.
way to make us feel better, grounded, supported, cared for, insert adjective here that is fulfilling, then we have agency over that choice. And if there are other things that aren't filling you as much, then perhaps that is where you start to look in your I guess cutting of the things. I guess the other thing too that was like offered to me once was just recognizing that just because you do it this one way one time doesn't mean that it has to be forever. Like I
Oh,
think,
exactly. Yeah.
it's like if this month I'm realizing that I'm spending a lot going out with eating and the next month I decide to cut that a lot, that doesn't mean that for the rest of my life I no longer eat out. It just means that like maybe there's a month that I take a step back and I just, you know, save that bucket for a little bit more while I replenish, or maybe the following month I put that on rotation and the next month I do a little bit more cutting back on like seeing shows, and then the following month it's a little bit more cutting back on travel or whatever it is, so that it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like it's this stuck thing that I've made this choice once and I can't shift it. I think that's also a fear that I
Yeah.
know many people have.
But you can't make those informed decisions until you know what your numbers are, like
Yeah.
what you even have to work with. But
Yeah.
that can be a really powerful tool to just
Yeah.
say, I can choose how I want to spend this money that I have.
Yeah. If you start to see in your Venn diagram that a
Hmm.
lot of your expending is in one particular category. So whether it's really in the time or really in the energy or really in the money, how is that balance recalibrated? Because that isn't as much about number data. You can't necessarily, I mean, I guess in theory, if I have it on my calendar that I've exerted X amount of hours for X project, then sure, that is calculable. But energy is a little bit of a different, you can't weigh that. What are we doing?
Yeah. So I think when I lumped those together, like for me, they're all kind of part of the same. They are like the capital that you have to spend in the world, which is your time and your energy and your money.
Mhm.
And it's all those three things that you want to work together to be able to give you the life that you want.
Yeah.
And so if you are, and these are all levers that you can pull. So like if you are feeling like really drained energy wise, what can you spend extra on something? Or can you spend time on something?
Mm.
Or are you spending too much time on something? Or are you spending too much money on something and that's why you're drained? So
Mhm.
they're all just the metrics that you can use to like figure out exactly how you feel the best.
Ah, I see. So it's more of just like a calibration of the balance of them
Yeah.
internally.
So
Right.
the Venn diagram is those things together, and then on this side, it is like the things that are important to you, and you want to make sure that those two things overlap.
Got it. Okay, so all 3 of those are in the capital of how you s
Exactly.
of how you
Yeah.
exist on this planet, and then
Yeah.
the things that you love or of interest, the overlap of those 2 are actually where we're trying to feel the most
Yep.
cohesion.
And I like having all of those together because sometimes it's not really about the money. Like
Mhm.
I was in a job that I didn't love, that didn't pay me that much, but it paid me enough, like enough to feel stable. But I felt like it was the money, but then I left that job and started making less, but doing something that I really loved, and I
Mm.
realized that that was what I needed. I didn't need more money, I needed my time back
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to feel like myself again.
Yeah. I've said this on many episodes prior. It's been something that over the past couple of years, specifically starting with the pandemic, is a philosophy that I really try very hard to gauge my life through a little bit. And I
Mhm.
forget who ever told it to me, and I certainly don't remember where it stemmed from, but you are the average of the 5 people you spend your most time with.
Mhm.
And that's not who you like. It's not like
Yeah.
the people that you love. It's like if you think about your day and you're commuting for 3 hours a day and you're sitting next to a person who's yelling into their phone, or you have a boss that just is berating you and you're at work for 7 hours a day, or you have a client that is just really on you and that is for 3 hours of your time. Um, the average of these 3 people is really going to energetically pull on you and affect you. There's no way it can't. And obviously, there's privilege around. Sometimes you don't have the option or the ability to remove yourself from these kinds of
Mhm.
energies. So I recognize that that is sometimes a real privilege to be able to be like, I can remove myself and now my life is different.
Yes.
And to at least even bring awareness of like, oh, wow, I am spending 10 hours of my breathing alive day surrounded
Mhm.
by these things that are draining me, how can I then give more care, love, grace to myself to support and or counteract these energies that have pulled so much from me? So and or potentially like cut out humans or
Yeah.
experiences in your life that are not serving you, if you're able to do that or in your position to do that. But for me, it's been really cathartic to be a little bit more self-aware and purposeful around how am I actually spending my time and or with what energies am I surrounded by so that I could show up more fully because I'm not being so drained. And just
Mhm.
even that awareness for me over the past couple of years has been really monumental as a shift, and that
Yeah.
I get to choose when I can and have the privilege to, like, okay, I can put myself in this environment knowing that it's not going to really fill me in the way I need to for X, Y, and Z reasons. And then on the counter of that, I could put this instead. And that's going to make me feel much better because I have this to look forward to.
And that is exactly the same way that it works with your money.
Mhm.
Like that experience that you've had with your time, you can also put towards your money. Like it feels good for me to support things that I care about.
Mhm.
Like that exchange of money makes me feel like great. Us as a society, we've been like so concerned with the question of like how much money do you make? But
Mhm.
really the important question is like what do you do with the money that you make?
Mhm.
Because there's so much more power and control in that question.
Oof,
And
I
people
love
do
that.
amazing yeah, people do amazing things with not as much money as the most money, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a New York thing too, like, what do you
Yeah.
do? And then, the next thing perhaps in your brain that you think about is like, "Oh, this person makes this amount because I think that they do this thing." But I
Mhm.
really love that as a question of like, what do you do with the money that you make?
Yeah.
Is then I learn all about your values. I learn all about, yeah, what you think is important and where you want to focus your energy and time, and more specifically, your money, obviously, in this case.
Mhm.
But I really think that that's a wonderful question. Not that we need to necessarily even focus on money to begin with, but I think,
Yeah.
but if that is part of the zeitgeist, then that is such a more helpful phrasing.
Unfortunately, we do need it to live. Like, at the
Yeah,
moment, we do need to have a good relationship with our money.
yeah. As we begin to wind down our time, is there anything that I have not asked that I would be remiss to not have asked about this conversation? Or did we
There's
not talk about that we probably should?
I think the one other powerful question that I would point to, when you are feeling shame about money, to kind of ask yourself this is something that I learned, like, doing the trauma of money work that I do, is this is a really powerful tool, is to ask yourself, like, "Whose shame is this?"
Mm,
And then start peeling back the layers, like, is this relational shame? Like, did I learn this in my household? Is this societal shame? Did I learn this because I chose to be an artist? Is this systemic shame? And do I just live in a world in which I was, like, told to learn these things about myself?
mhm.
And then give yourself all the grace and the forgiveness that you need in order to be able to forgive yourself for what you had to do to survive in
How
that
do you
moment.
do that?
I think acknowledging it is like power, just not blaming yourself. Like just like if you have to repeat a mantra, if you have to write it out, if you just have to like put it somewhere. Sometimes it takes like many repetitions of something
Yeah.
like that for us to like really be able to internalize it and believe it. But and also surround yourself with people who believe that for you.
Mhm. I mean, I feel like that's a lifelong practice for so many of us who have been just, again, just brought up in spaces that have brought shame to us for just existing for the way that we exist.
Yeah. When you choose to be an artist, you're almost like given the choice, like I'm going to make money or I'm going to be an artist. And like you have to choose that
Yeah, which
in
is
a way, which
so
is
not
so
cute.
backwards. Like
Mhm.
the arts is a like industry that does generate capital and pays people
Yeah.
for their
Billions
work.
of dollars. It's a
So many,
billion-dollar
yeah.
industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's also it too that, for the more I keep existing in this space and certainly through this podcast and bringing on different individuals to talk about, say, taxes or finances or budgeting or any of that, just recognizing that there is a lot of money out there. Like, again, we've been taught that there isn't and that there's a scarcity to it, but there's a shit ton of money that exists on this planet. There is a fuck ton of money. It's a lot of fucking money, and we might not feel like we have access to it. And it's
Mhm.
about how do we reframe that so that we actually recognize that perhaps we can A, access it, and B, like it doesn't have to be the way that it is.
Yeah.
I say that as though I figured this out, which
We're
I
all just trying to figure it out. We're all just
yeah.
trying to reimagine the way
Yeah.
that the world
But
could
even just,
be.
like, being aware of that for myself of, like, "Oh, no, no, there is
Yeah.
a lot. There is
Yeah.
100% a lot." It's just how can we ask for it? How can we put ourselves in positions to have access to it? How can we feel more
How can
empowered when we get it?
and we know that we're worthy of it.
And, well, inherently just because we
Yeah.
exist on this planet, but 100%.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that work, that internal work on oneself to really, get clear about that. I love, yeah, like, whose shame is this? And again, the awareness, the seeing it in front of you, allows one to make these decisions.
Something that financial planners talk about all the time, which is I find so funny on now also being in a creative space, is that it is stories that change minds, not data and numbers.
Mm,
So even in a world where it is fueled by data and numbers, like we have learned that we need to tell stories about those numbers in order for people to understand them. And is like really why the arts is so important. Like storytelling is really the way that the world changes.
yeah.
It is the way that we move forward as a society, and not to value that arm of the world of like the society that does that work so deeply is really tragic.
Yeah.
So
Well, tell me more about this storytelling thing being a way to see it through.
I can't think of any time where I have been like confronted with a bunch of just like plain numbers and been like, you need to change your life based on these numbers.
Yeah.
Like the numbers are all like contextualized within a greater story.
Mhm.
For in financial planning, this is like totally not related to what we're talking about and like not a great example. But if you see a number and you say, okay, you are like 40 years old, if you retire at 60, you are going to run out of money at 80.
Mhm.
Like that is really hard to like conceptualize.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then until you tell the story around like education and supporting your family are like values to you. Like if you don't save more now, you will get to a point in your life when you will need to ask for resources from your family instead of supporting them. And
Mhm.
like that just feels like a different framing
Mhm.
than naming the years.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yes. And so for us artists who are
Mhm.
natural storytellers,
Mhm.
how can we incorporate that into the numbers for ourselves?
Yeah, so that is instead of looking at a number of being like, "Oh, this thing is gonna cost me X dollars,"
Mhm.
you can think about, "Oh, this thing is going to enhance my life through all of the ways that it is going to like bring me joy, bring my community joy, allow me to continue to pursue my art, all these things." And on the flip side, it'd be like spending on this is going to take away from me being able to pursue these other things that I
Mhm.
value. So
Mhm.
make the budgeting not even about the numbers. Make it
Mm.
about like the way that you can bring your personal story to life.
I love that because that feels like an actual healthy and helpful reframe for us
Mhm.
artists who may already approaching it feels really daunting, especially if we're not empowered to look at numbers as numbers.
Mhm.
So to be able to see the numbers as a story and to be able to put together a through line around what the story is telling us, I
Mhm.
think that in of itself is a really interesting starting point, frankly, if we're thinking about even just starting. Being like, okay, we see the numbers. What are they telling us? This is pulling me towards this. This is bringing me towards this. This is incorporating this. This is making me feel this way. This is allowing me to do this
Mhm.
more. Um, and putting the actual verbiage to the story rather than just sitting with the
Yeah.
numbers. That definitely for me at least feels far more tangible than like, cool, now I'm gonna have to like add and subtract and divide things. And then all of my, pre-calc and algebra that I learned in middle school and high school that I hated more than anything has to somehow come into play that I resent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true, and, like, that's the real heart of it, Like, that is like, money is a tool to help us live the lives that we want, and so if you can just start with the life that you want and then figure out how to use money to get yourself there in whatever framework you need, like,
Yeah.
that is essentially the whole thing.
So this was super helpful to even just begin to kind of talk about in this way. I know obviously it's super individualistic and individualized in order to like get specific with the numbers, but I think to even just again begin having these conversations and recognize that we are not alone in this and that most of us have feelings around even talking about it and are not taught how to even approach it. So I think demystifying that in this space already is such a gift. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to work with you or has any further questions or wants to reach out, what within your boundaries is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, so my company website is called The Financial Grove. You can reach out through that, or my email is sylvie@thefinancialgrove.com. Or if you Google my name, I'm like the only person with my name on the internet. So you can
Oh,
find my LinkedIn or my website or anything that you need. So
that must be so nice for you.
you are so welcome to get in touch with me. I do free consults for anyone who is even like, and even if you don't think you're ready to work with me, let's chat and I can point you in the right direction for the resources that you do need right now. Um, Feel free to reach out and let me know.
I love it.
I also will say
Yeah,
financial planning and financial coaching is a great survival job if you are interested in learning more about this, because it is like a flexible role that provides value to your community. So if you want to learn about that too, feel free to reach out.
I love that. I call it, I mean, I should probably like trademark this, but I call it a thrival job instead of a
Oh,
survival
that's a
job.
great. I haven't liked the word survival, so
Yeah.
I'm going to start using that.
I've been
Yeah.
really trying to make it a thing, the thrival
Yes,
job, just because how is it allowing you to thrive? You know, like
exactly.
my hustles on the side,
Yeah.
are they filling my soul? Not necessarily, but they're allowing me to live my life. So here we are.
Yes. The
Um,
thrival job. I'm going to
thrival
use that.
job. Great. Thank you so, so much for being in this space and
Yeah,
for
thank you for having
sharing.
me.